My parents skipped my birthday party, so I erased all their events from my calendar. The restaurant reservation was for 30 people at 7 p.m. I'd spent 3 weeks planning my 30th birthday dinner, coordinating schedules, sending reminders, choosing a menu that would accommodate everyone's dietary restrictions. The private room at Bellamy's cost $800 just to reserve, not including food or drinks. My parents had confirmed twice, once by text, once on a phone call where my mother had even asked if she should bring anything. "Just yourselves," I'd said, relieved they were making an effort for once. They hadn't attended my college graduation because of a business emergency. They'd missed my 25th birthday because of a crisis with my younger sister Paige. Every major milestone in my life had been overshadowed by something more important. But 30 felt different. 30 was a decade marker, and they'd promised. By 7:30, everyone had arrived except them. My friends were drinking wine, making awkward small talk, checking their phones. By 8, when the waiters started hovering about ordering, I called my mother. It went straight to voicemail. I tried my father. Same thing. My best friend Lucas squeezed my shoulder. Maybe they're just running late. Traffic? But I knew. I'd known since 7:15 when neither of them had sent the courtesy text they'd send to any business associate. At 8:20, my phone finally buzzed. A text from my mother. "So sorry, sweetheart. Something came up with the foundation gala tomorrow. We're handling a crisis. We'll make it up to you. Love you." The foundation gala. The annual charity event my parents hosted every year. The social highlight of their calendar. The thing they'd been planning for 8 months. Something had gone wrong with it, and naturally, that took priority over their son's birthday. I stared at that text. "We'll make it up to you," and felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, exactly. More like a structural failure that had been developing for years, finally giving way. "They're not coming," I announced to the table, pocketing my phone. "Let's order." We ate. People tried to be cheerful to compensate for the obvious absence. But the empty chairs at the head of the table announced my parents' priorities louder than any speech could have. I drove home after dinner, declined the after-party some friends had suggested, sat in my apartment with the lights off. My apartment, which I could barely afford because I'd been helping my parents manage their business affairs for years without proper compensation. My apartment, which was modest and small compared to my parents' estate because they'd always said family helped family without expecting payment. My apartment, where I spent every evening managing their schedules, their appointments, their entire complicated lives because they were too busy with important work to handle logistics. I'd been doing it since I was 19, started as a favor during a particularly hectic period, gradually became my permanent unpaid job. I managed their personal calendars, their business appointments, their social obligations, their travel arrangements. I coordinated with their assistants, their lawyers, their accountants. I was essentially their chief of staff, except I had no staff and no salary, just family obligation and the constant promise that they appreciated me, valued me, would compensate me eventually when things calmed down. Things never calmed down. I opened my laptop, pulled up the master calendar I'd built in a custom database. It wasn't just a calendar. It was an intricate system I'd spent years developing, tracking not just appointments but dependencies, preparing briefing documents, setting up automated reminders, managing contacts. Every event had notes, context, preparation requirements. My parents' lives ran on this system, and I was the only one who truly understood how it all connected. I'd created something irreplaceable because I'd wanted to be irreplaceable to them, wanted them to need me, wanted to matter. The Foundation Gala was tomorrow night. I could see the entry. Foundation Annual Gala, Grand Meridian Hotel, 6 p.m., red carpet 5:30, speech at 8 p.m., governor attending, mayor confirmed, 1.2 million fundraising goal, donor list attached, media briefing in file, prepared remarks ready. Below that were hundreds of related tasks, reminders I'd set, connections to other events. The entire thing was a house of cards I'd carefully constructed. And then there were all the other events, business meetings, client dinners, medical appointments, social obligations. Everything that made my parents' lives function was in this database, managed by me, dependent on my constant attention. I selected my father's calendar, hit delete. The confirmation dialogue appeared. "Are you sure you want to delete all events for Richard Ashford? This cannot be undone." I clicked yes. Then I opened my mother's calendar. Are you sure you want to delete all events for Patricia Ashford? This cannot be undone. Yes. The database processed for a moment, removing years of carefully organized information. Appointments, meetings, reminders, notes, all of it gone. I'd kept backups, of course. I wasn't completely reckless. But those backups were on a drive in my apartment, encrypted with a password only I knew. If my parents wanted their lives back, they'd have to ask me for them. They'd have to acknowledge that I mattered, that my time and effort had value, that you couldn't skip your son's 30th birthday and expect him to keep managing your entire existence for free. I closed my laptop, went to bed, and slept better than I had in months. The first call came at 6 a.m. My mother, frantic. Daniel, something's wrong with the calendar. All my events are gone. Everything. I don't know what meetings I have today. I can't find the gala information. Fix this now. Her tone was the one she used with incompetent service providers, not with her son. I'm not sure I can help with that, I said, my voice carefully neutral. I'm actually taking some time off from managing your schedules. Silence. Then, what are you talking about? Daniel, this isn't funny. The gala is tonight. I need that information. I felt surprisingly calm. Maybe you should have thought about that before you skipped my birthday last night. Another silence, longer. You're seriously holding the gala hostage because we missed your party? Daniel, that's incredibly childish. Childish. She'd called me childish for wanting my parents at my birthday after managing their lives for 11 years without complaint. I deleted your calendars, I said. All of them. Every appointment, every event, every note. It's all gone. I heard her sharp intake of breath. You what? I deleted everything. If you want it back, we're going to have a conversation about compensation, boundaries, and basic respect. Until then, you're on your own. I hung up. She called back immediately. I didn't answer. By 9 a.m., my father called. His approach was different, aggressive, threatening. Daniel, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to restore those calendars immediately. This is my business, my livelihood, my reputation. You're jeopardizing relationships worth millions of dollars. I let him finish. Then, you should have thought about your relationship with your son before you skipped his 30th birthday for a gala you've been planning for 8 months and didn't need to personally handle last night. My father's voice dropped to the cold register he used in business negotiations. Are you seriously this petty? This vindictive? We had an emergency. Adult children understand that parents have responsibilities. Adult children. As if I hadn't been adult enough to manage his entire professional life for 11 years. I had a responsibility too, Dad, to myself, to stop letting you treat me like unpaid staff. The calendars are gone. If you want them back, we negotiate terms. He hung up. Good. Let him understand what it felt like to be dismissed. My phone rang constantly for the next hour. My mother, my father, my younger sister Paige calling to tell me I was being unreasonable. My parents' executive assistant Karen asking if I could please restore just the most critical appointments. I ignored them all. Let them scramble. Let them realize how much they'd taken me for granted. Around 11, my mother switched tactics. She showed up at my apartment, buzzing the intercom urgently. I considered not letting her in, but curiosity won. She looked frazzled, hair less than perfect, makeup not quite flawless, wearing casual clothes I'd rarely seen her in. This was Patricia Ashford without her armor. Daniel, please, we can talk about whatever you need to talk about, but I need the gala information. The governor is speaking tonight. The mayor is attending. We have donors flying in from 3 states. This event took 8 months to plan. And without those files, I don't know who's confirmed, what the seating arrangement is, what the program order is. I leaned against my doorframe, arms crossed. You took 3 months to plan my birthday dinner. It was 30 people and 1 venue. You couldn't show up for 2 hours. She flinched. I know we should have been there. But this is different. This is more important than me. That's what you were going to say. My mother's composure cracked. That's not fair. Isn't it? When have I ever been the priority, Mom? When have I ever mattered more than the foundation or the business or Paige's drama or literally anything else? She sat on my couch without being invited, buried her face in her hands. This was manipulative, I knew. The vulnerable mother act, designed to trigger my protective instincts. But I stayed standing, stayed unmoved. Daniel, you're right. We've taken you for granted. We've relied on you too much without appreciating you properly. After the gala, we'll sit down, discuss compensation, establish boundaries, but please, please restore the calendar, just the gala information. I'm begging you. Begging. Patricia Ashford didn't beg. This was how desperate she was. No, I said. She looked up, shocked. What? I said no. You don't get to skip my birthday, call me childish when I object, have Dad threaten me, and then get what you want because you said please. The gala is in 7 hours. You have plenty of time to reconstruct what you need from emails, phone records, and your own memory. Consider it a learning experience. My mother stood, her vulnerability transforming instantly into rage. You're going to sabotage a charity event that helps underprivileged children because your feelings are hurt. Do you have any idea how selfish that is? The accusation stung, but I'd anticipated it. I'm not sabotaging anything. You planned this gala. You have an assistant, an event coordinator, a venue that has records. You have every tool you need except the convenience of having me do all the work. Figure it out. She left without another word, slamming my door hard enough to rattle the frame. The gala, according to social media posts I saw later, was a disaster. Not a complete failure. It happened. People attended. Money was raised. But the carefully orchestrated perfection my parents prided themselves on was absent. Seating arrangements were wrong, leading to awkward social dynamics when rival donors were placed at the same table. The program ran 30 minutes behind schedule, causing the governor to leave before the keynote speech. Media coverage focused on the organizational chaos rather than the cause. Several major donors were apparently offended by various snubs, real or perceived, that wouldn't have happened if I'd been managing the details. My parents' reputation for flawless execution took a significant hit. I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and guilt watching it unfold online. The guilt bothered me more than the satisfaction pleased me, which probably said something about my psychological state. But I reminded myself, this wasn't about punishing underprivileged children. This was about my parents learning they couldn't treat people, even family, especially family, as disposable resources. The calls and texts continued for days. My parents alternated between anger, guilt-tripping, and promises to discuss this properly if I'd just restore the calendars first. I held firm. A week after my birthday, I received a certified letter from my father's attorney. It was a cease and desist, claiming I'd stolen proprietary business information and demanding I return all data immediately or face legal action. I called Lucas, who happened to be a corporate attorney, and read him the letter. He laughed. They're claiming you stole their personal calendar? That's not how intellectual property works. Tell them to pound sand. I wrote a response through Lucas's firm, pointing out that I'd provided free services for 11 years, that personal calendar information wasn't proprietary business data, and that if they wanted to pursue legal action, I'd be happy to countersue for unpaid wages. That silenced the legal threats, but it also escalated the family war. My sister Paige called, crying. Danny, why are you doing this? Mom and Dad are a mess. The business is suffering. They're missing meetings, double booking appointments, losing track of commitments. You're destroying their lives over one birthday party. The way she framed it made me the villain, the unreasonable one. But Paige had always been their favorite, the daughter who'd gotten a trust fund, who'd had her wedding paid for, who'd received support and attention I'd never gotten. Easy for her to defend them when she'd never been treated as unpaid labor. It's not about one birthday party, I told her. It's about 11 years of being taken for granted. It's about managing their entire lives without compensation while struggling to build my own life. It's about them treating me like an employee they didn't have to pay rather than their son. Paige was quiet for a moment. I didn't realize it was that bad. Of course you didn't. You got everything handed to you. I had to earn scraps of their attention by making myself useful. That was harsh, probably harsher than Paige deserved. But the resentment had been building for years, and now that I'd started expressing it, it was hard to stop. 2 weeks after my birthday, my parents requested a formal meeting. Not at their house, not at my apartment, at a neutral location, a conference room at my father's attorney's office. They were treating this like a business negotiation, which was probably appropriate given that's essentially what our relationship had become. I brought Lucas for support and legal counsel. My parents brought their attorney, a stern man named Gregory Vance, who clearly thought I was an entitled brat holding my parents hostage. We sat across from each other at a polished conference table, and I felt like I was in a hostage negotiation rather than a family discussion. Gregory spoke first. Mr. Ashford, Daniel, let's establish some basic facts. You unilaterally deleted data that your parents relied on for both personal and professional obligations. This deletion has caused significant harm, missed meetings, damaged business relationships, reputational damage from the Foundation Gala. While we acknowledge you provided services managing their schedules, this was done as a family member, not as an employee. There was no contract, no agreed-upon compensation, no formal arrangement. Your decision to delete this information was, legally speaking, conversion of property, or possibly theft of services, depending on how we frame it. Lucas interrupted before I could respond. Except Daniel created those calendars using his own skills, time, and resources. He used his personal software, his personal computer, his personal expertise. The data was created by him, stored on systems he owned, and maintained through his unpaid labor. If anyone has a claim for theft of services, it's Daniel. Your clients received 11 years of professional-level executive assistance without compensation. The fair market value of those services would be approximately $110,000 annually, or $1.921 million total, not including benefits or overtime. The number hung in the air. My mother went pale. My father's jaw tightened. Gregory shuffled papers. That's an absurd calculation. Family members help each other. There's no implicit employment contract. Lucas smiled. Actually, when you direct someone's work, set their hours, and depend on their output for your business operations, that creates an implied employment relationship, regardless of familial connections. The Department of Labor has ruled on this repeatedly. Daniel has documentation of the work he performed, the hours he invested, and the professional value he provided. If you want to pursue legal action, we'll be happy to let a court decide. The meeting shifted after that. My parents realized they couldn't bully or sue their way out of this. We negotiated for 3 hours. My demands were simple: formal acknowledgement of the 11 years of work I'd provided, payment of $250,000 in back compensation, less than the full market value, but enough to be meaningful, and an agreement that I would no longer manage their personal or professional schedules. They could have their calendar data back, but our relationship would be on new terms. My father tried to argue that $250,000 was excessive. Lucas pulled out documentation of similar executive assistant positions, showing that I'd actually provided services worth far more. My mother tried to argue that family shouldn't work this way, that love and support shouldn't be transactional. I pointed out that they'd been treating me transactionally for years, expecting professional-level service while providing minimal emotional support or recognition. We finally reached an agreement, $175,000 paid over 3 years, a written apology for missing my birthday and for taking my work for granted, and most importantly, boundaries. I would no longer be their de facto chief of staff. They would hire actual employees to manage their affairs. Our relationship would be familial, not professional. Gregory drafted the agreement. We all signed. I provided the backup drive with their calendar data. And just like that, years of resentment were reduced to a legal contract. The money appeared in my account in the first installment a week later, $58,333.33. It felt surreal, seeing concrete compensation for work I'd done for so long without acknowledgement. But the money wasn't really the point, I realized. The point was that my parents had to admit they'd been wrong, had to acknowledge in writing that they'd exploited me, had to face consequences for taking me for granted. The written apology arrived by mail, handwritten by both parents. It was stiff, formal, clearly something Gregory had helped craft to avoid legal liability, but it existed. Physical proof that they'd admitted fault. I put it in a drawer and tried to figure out what came next. My relationship with my parents didn't magically heal. The settlement was legal, not emotional. We were cordial at family gatherings but distant. My mother would occasionally try to ask me to just quickly check if she had any conflicts on a certain date, catching herself mid-sentence and awkwardly trailing off. My father avoided me entirely at first, angry that I'd held him hostage over a calendar. Paige tried to play mediator, encouraging reconciliation, suggesting family therapy. But some breaks can't be fixed with mediation. 6 months after the settlement, I got a call from Karen, my parents' executive assistant. She'd been friendly during the whole ordeal, had privately told me she understood why I'd done what I did. Now she sounded worried. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. I'm not sure if it's my place, but I think you should know. Your parents are in financial trouble. Serious trouble." I'd assumed my parents were wealthy. They lived in a mansion, drove luxury cars, hosted charity galas, maintained a lifestyle that screamed success. But Karen explained what I'd never known. It was all leveraged, all borrowed. The business was struggling, had been struggling for years. The foundation gala wasn't just about charity, it was about maintaining appearances, about convincing wealthy associates that Richard and Patricia Ashford were still successful enough to be worth doing business with. My parents had been circling the drain financially, and I'd never known because I was too busy managing their schedules to look at their finances. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked Karen. She hesitated. "Because they're blaming you, telling people that you sabotaged them, that the business started failing after you stopped helping them. They're making you the scapegoat for problems that existed long before you deleted those calendars. I thought you deserved to know." The betrayal of it landed like a punch. Even after the settlement, after the acknowledgement, after everything, they were rewriting history to make me the villain of their failing empire. I thanked Karen and hung up. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I started digging into my parents' finances. They'd given me access to their accounts years ago when I managed their schedules, and apparently no one had revoked that access. What I found was worse than Karen had suggested. My parents weren't just in financial trouble. They were running a shell game, using foundation funds to cover personal expenses, taking loans from business accounts to pay personal debts, operating in a gray area that might not be illegal, but was definitely unethical. The charity gala I'd supposedly sabotaged, it wasn't primarily about helping underprivileged children. It was about raising money that would go into the foundation, which my parents controlled, which they used to maintain their lifestyle and business operations. The donors thought they were funding childhood education and health care. They were actually funding my parents' mortgage and car payments. I sat with this information for days, unsure what to do with it. My parents had wronged me, yes. But was I really going to destroy them? Report them for what amounted to embezzlement? Expose the foundation fraud? That felt like going too far. But then I thought about the donors, wealthy people who genuinely wanted to help children, who believed they were supporting a legitimate cause, about the actual organizations that should have been receiving that money, about all the people my parents had manipulated just like they'd manipulated me. I made copies of everything: bank statements, fund transfers, emails discussing how to temporarily redirect foundation money with promises to repay it later. Then I sent an anonymous package to the State Attorney General's office with a note: "The Ashford Foundation is committing charity fraud. Evidence attached." I didn't include my name. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. The investigation was announced 3 weeks later. The state AG's office, following up on an anonymous tip, was reviewing the Ashford Foundation's finances. My parents immediately knew it was me, though they couldn't prove it. My mother called, livid. "You reported us? Your own parents? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stayed calm. "I have no idea what you're talking about. But if you've been misusing charity funds, that's on you, not whoever reported it." My father's call was colder, more threatening. "If we go down, Daniel, you're going down with us. You managed our schedules for years. You knew about everything. We'll make sure everyone knows you were complicit." It was a bluff. I'd never had access to their financial decisions, never knew about the fund transfers. But the threat revealed how desperate they were, how willing to destroy their own son to protect themselves. The investigation took 8 months. During that time, my parents hired expensive lawyers, burned through what remained of their assets, tried to negotiate a settlement with the AG's office. They also tried to rebuild their relationship with me, suddenly interested in having dinner, in talking things through, in family unity. The manipulation was transparent. They wanted me close in case they needed me to lie for them or take partial blame. I declined every invitation. The settlement with the AG's office, when it came, was devastating for my parents. They agreed to shut down the foundation, repay $340,000 in misappropriated funds, pay $100,000 in fines, and accept 5 years of probation. They avoided criminal charges, but their reputation was destroyed. The society pages that had once celebrated them now detailed their disgrace. Business associates distanced themselves. Friends stopped calling. The empire they'd built on appearances and borrowed money collapsed entirely. They had to sell the mansion, downsize to a modest townhouse, liquidate assets to cover debts. My father's business closed. My mother's social position evaporated. Within a year of my birthday party, their entire lives had been dismantled. I felt complicated about it. Guilty, because I'd triggered the chain of events. Satisfied, because they'd faced consequences for taking advantage of people, including me. Sad, because they were still my parents, and watching them lose everything hurt despite everything they'd done. Lucas told me I shouldn't feel guilty. You didn't commit fraud. You didn't misuse charity money. You didn't skip your son's birthday after taking him for granted for 11 years. They made their choices. You just stopped enabling them. He was probably right. But guilt isn't always logical. A year and a half after my 30th birthday, my mother called. Not angry this time, just tired. Daniel, can we talk? Really talk? We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. She looked older, worn down by stress and shame. Gone was the polished society woman who'd run charity galas. This was just Patricia, my mom, stripped of pretenses. I'm sorry, she said. Not the lawyer-approved apology we sent. I'm genuinely sorry for taking you for granted, for missing your birthday, for treating you like staff instead of our son, for trying to blame you for our own mistakes, for all of it. I wanted to believe her, but I'd learned to be cautious. What do you want, Mom? She smiled sadly. Nothing. That's the point. I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm here because I finally understand what we did to you. It took losing everything to see it. We built our lives on taking advantage of people. You, our donors, our business associates. We thought we were entitled to it because we were successful, because we worked hard, because we deserved it. But we were just users, taking and never giving back fairly. She paused. You were right to delete those calendars, right to demand compensation, right to report the foundation fraud. Every consequence we've faced, we earned. I didn't know what to say. This vulnerability from my mother, it felt real in a way her previous apologies hadn't. I didn't report you to destroy you, I said finally. I did it because people were being misled. Donors thought they were helping children. She nodded. I know. And you were right. We told ourselves it was temporary, that we'd repay it, that the ends justified the means. Classic embezzler thinking. We became exactly the kind of people we used to look down on. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked, maybe for the first time in years. She told me about the pressure of maintaining appearances, about how the lifestyle became a trap, about making increasingly unethical choices to sustain something unsustainable. I told her about feeling invisible unless I was useful, about the resentment that built over years, about why that birthday party had mattered so much. It wasn't reconciliation, exactly. The damage was too deep for that. But it was honest. And honesty was something we'd never really had before. My father never apologized. He blamed me until the end, convinced that if I just kept managing their affairs, kept enabling their dysfunction, everything would have been fine. He died 3 years later, heart attack, stress-related. I went to the funeral, stood in the back, felt sad for the relationship we'd never had and never would. My mother and I rebuilt something resembling a relationship over the following years. Not the dynamic we'd had before. I was never again their unpaid assistant, never again prioritized their needs over my own. But we had coffee occasionally, called on holidays, acknowledged each other's birthdays. She got a job eventually, working as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit, staying far away from anything that involved managing money or public-facing roles. She lived modestly, paid her debts, seemed genuinely humbled by everything that had happened. Paige remained close with both of us, often serving as bridge, though she never fully understood what it had been like to be the useful child rather than the loved child. We had different experiences of the same family, and that gap was impossible to fully cross. The $175,000 settlement helped me start my own business, scheduling and logistics consulting, ironically. I was good at organizing complex systems, and it turned out companies would actually pay me for skills my parents had taken for free. The work was satisfying because it was properly valued, properly compensated, properly respected. People asked sometimes if I regretted it, deleting the calendars, triggering the chain of events that destroyed my parents' lives. The honest answer was complicated. I regretted that my parents made choices that required consequences. I regretted that our relationship was so transactional it broke down when I demanded fair treatment. I regretted the years I'd spent being useful instead of being loved, but I didn't regret demanding accountability, didn't regret refusing to enable their dysfunction, didn't regret standing up for myself even when it cost them everything. They'd built their empire on taking advantage of people. The foundation of that empire was always going to collapse eventually. I'd just been the catalyst that accelerated the inevitable. On my 35th birthday, I threw another party. Smaller this time, just close friends, people who'd supported me through everything. No fancy venue, just my apartment, good food, better company. My mother sent a card and a small gift. Nothing extravagant, just thoughtful. She didn't come to the party. I hadn't invited her, and she understood why. But the card said, "Happy birthday, Daniel. I'm proud of who you've become, even though we tried our best to prevent it. Love, Mom." It was the most honest thing she'd ever written to me, and it made me cry. Years later, people would ask what I'd learned from the whole ordeal, looking for a neat, moral, or tidy conclusion. The truth was messier than that. I'd learned that love without boundaries was just exploitation waiting to happen. That family didn't excuse taking advantage of people, that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was let people face the consequences of their actions instead of protecting them from reality. I'd learned that deleting those calendars, that one moment of saying enough, had been both the hardest and most necessary thing I'd ever done. Not because it felt good, but because it was true. And truth, however painful, was the only foundation strong enough to build anything real on. My parents had learned that lesson the hard way, losing everything before understanding what actually mattered. I'd learned it by being willing to lose them if that's what honesty required. Neither lesson was easy, but both were essential. In the end, that empty chair at my 30th birthday party had taught me more than any amount of their presence ever had. That being valued mattered more than being useful. That boundaries were acts of love, and that sometimes the only way to save a relationship was to be willing to destroy its broken version first. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.